The music, the costumes, the hair. There's only one ABBA. And after decades of going their own way, the Swedish supergroup is...
For decades, ABBA fans have speculated about the truth behind Benny Andersson's relationship with Agnetha Fältskog. Were they simply bandmates, former lovers, or something much deeper, buried beneath the glitter of one of the greatest pop groups in history? At 78, Benny Andersson has finally broken his silence, and what he reveals about her is not what the world expected. This is the untold story of ABBA's most complicated bond. When we talk about ABBA, most people immediately think of the dazzling harmonies, the glittering costumes, and the infectious melodies that swept the globe. But behind the magic, there was an architect, a man who lived not for the spotlight, but for the music itself. That man was Benny Andersson. Born Göran Bror. Benny Andersson in Stockholm, Sweden, in 1946, he grew up in a modest home where music was not a luxury, but a lifeline. His father and grandfather were accordion players, and by the time Benny was 6 years old, he was picking out melodies on the family piano. Unlike many future stars, Benny wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing sound, experimenting with rhythm, melody, and chords, until they formed something bigger than himself. By his teenage years, Benny was fully immersed in Sweden's growing pop scene. At 18, he joined the Hep Stars, a Swedish rock band often compared to the Beatles for their popularity at the time. With Benny as their keyboardist, the band dominated Swedish charts in the mid-1960s, known as the Swedish Beatles, the Hep. Stars weren't just a training ground for Benny. They were his first taste of what music could do: unite, electrify, and transform. But Benny's ambitions stretched further than local fame. It was during this period that fate brought him together with Björn Ulvaeus, a young musician from another band, the Hootenanny Singers. The chemistry between them was undeniable. Benny had a natural gift for melodies, while Björn excelled at lyrics and structure. Together, they began writing songs that were sharper, catchier, and more layered than anything in Sweden's mainstream. The late 1960s were also the years when Benny's personal life intertwined with his music. He met Anni-Frid Lyngstad, or Frida, a talented singer who would later become both his wife and his bandmate. At the same time, Björn was dating and soon married another rising star, Agnetha Fältskog, already known in Sweden for her solo career. The four of them, bound by both love and music, began collaborating casually. None of them could have predicted that this collaboration would soon become one of the most successful pop groups in history. By the early 1970s, the seeds of ABBA were firmly planted. In 1972, Benny and Björn wrote the song "People Need Love," performed with Agnetha and Frida. The record wasn't just a hit in Sweden, it hinted at something much bigger. Benny's ability to weave classical music influences into pop, layering them with harmonies from the two women, created a sound unlike anything else in Europe. Then came 1974. ABBA, as they were now officially called, entered the Eurovision Song Contest with Waterloo. The performance was explosive, colorful costumes, catchy lyrics, and a driving piano line that had Benny's fingerprints all over it. When ABBA won, the world finally turned its eyes to Sweden, and behind the scenes, Benny was orchestrating it all. Benny wasn't just a musician, he was the architect of ABBA's sound. While Agnetha and Frida gave voice to the songs and Björn shaped their lyrics, Benny built the foundation. From Mamma Mia to Dancing Queen, his melodies defined an era. Unlike many bands of the time, ABBA's music was polished, layered, and sophisticated, qualities that came directly from Benny's perfectionism in the studio. Yet for all his genius, Benny wasn't a star in the traditional sense. He wasn't the face on the magazine covers. He wasn't the subject of tabloid scandals, at least not to the degree of his bandmates. He preferred the studio to the spotlight, letting his music speak louder than his presence ever could. But while Benny projected calm professionalism, inside the group tensions simmered. His marriage to Frida began to fracture under the weight of fame. Björn and Agnetha's relationship, once the fairy tale romance of Sweden, began to crumble. By the late 1970s, the band was balancing chart-topping success with personal heartbreak. And yet Benny's commitment to the music never wavered. He once admitted that ABBA's songs often served as therapy, channeling the band's real-life emotions into timeless hits. Tracks like The Winner Takes It All weren't just pop songs. They were lived experiences born of divorce, heartbreak, and raw human pain. For Benny Andersson, music was never just entertainment. It was truth. It was the way he processed the world, the way he connected with both his bandmates and millions of fans. And it was this philosophy that made him not just a member of ABBA, but its heartbeat. By the time ABBA disbanded in 1982, Benny was already thinking beyond the glitter and disco balls. He would go on to compose musicals, collaborate on film scores, and become a respected elder statesman of European music. But no matter how far he traveled musically, one connection always lingered, the one between him and Agnetha Feltskog. For years, fans speculated about what really existed between Benny and Agnetha. Was it rivalry? Was it friendship? Was it something more unspoken, born of music, heartbreak, and time? At 78, Benny finally addressed it, and the truth he revealed about her would change the way fans saw ABBA forever. Long before ABBA became a household name, Agnetha Feltskog was already carving her place in the Swedish music scene. Born in 1950 in Jönköping, Sweden, she showed an early fascination with music. By age 5, she was writing simple songs on the piano, and by her teens, she was performing with a local dance band. While her classmates were preoccupied with school and friends, Agnetha was on stage, her blonde hair and crystalline voice setting her apart from the beginning. In 1967, at just 17, she released her debut single, Jag var så kär, I Was So in Love. The song topped Swedish charts, announcing her as a force in pop music. What stood out wasn't just her looks or stage presence, it was that voice. Pure, fragile, and emotionally piercing, Agnetha's vocals had the rare quality of sounding, both powerful and vulnerable at the same time. She became a solo star almost overnight, earning a reputation as Sweden's answer to the great female pop singers of the era. When Agnetha met Björn Ulvaeus, her life and career took a dramatic turn. Their romance, blossoming in the late 1960s, seemed like something out of a fairy tale. Both were rising stars in their own right, and when they married in 1971, Sweden's media hailed them as a golden couple. But this partnership wasn't just personal, it was professional. Through Björn, Agnetha became connected with Benny Andersson and Anni-Frid Lyngstad. What began as casual collaborations between friends soon evolved into a powerhouse musical group. By the time ABBA officially formed in the early 1970s, Agnetha had already proven herself as a soloist. But with ABBA, her voice reached new heights. It wasn't just that she could hit the high notes, it was the way she injected emotion into every syllable. On songs like SOS and The Winner Takes It All, she didn't just sing, she lived the lyrics. Listeners around the world weren't just hearing music, they were feeling heartbreak, longing, and hope through her delivery. Behind the spotlight, however, Agnetha struggled with the pressures of fame. She was naturally introverted, preferring quiet family life to flashing cameras and endless tours. While ABBA was conquering the globe with hit after hit, Agnetha privately battled intense homesickness. Her devotion to her children clashed with the band's demanding schedule, and she often felt trapped between motherhood and superstardom. Her marriage to Björn, which once seemed unshakable, began to falter under these pressures. By the late 1970s, their relationship was unraveling, and Agnetha was thrust into the painful position of having to sing songs that mirrored her own heartbreak. The Winner Takes It All, often regarded as one of ABBA's most emotionally devastating tracks, became an anthem for divorce, and Agnetha's delivery was so raw that many fans assumed she was singing directly from her soul. She later admitted that performing such songs felt like ripping open old wounds in public night after night. The dynamic between Agnetha and Benny Andersson was particularly complex. Benny was married to Frida at the time, yet as the band's creative driver, he often worked closely with Agnetha in the studio. Some insiders noted a quiet tension between them, a mix of respect, admiration, and something left unsaid. While there's no evidence of a romantic relationship, fans speculated for decades about the unspoken connection that lingered in their music. Agnetha's stage persona, a glamorous blonde who captivated audiences, was far from the real woman behind the microphone. Off stage, she was plagued by anxiety and a fear of flying, which made international tours a nightmare. When ABBA's world domination reached its peak, she sometimes felt more like a prisoner than a star. Fame had given her everything, and yet stolen her sense of peace. By the time ABBA disbanded in 1982, Agnetha was emotionally exhausted. While Benny and Björn threw themselves into new musical projects, Agnetha retreated. She released solo work, but her focus shifted to living a quieter life away from the chaos of fame. In Sweden, tabloids painted her as a recluse, spinning rumors about her isolation and personal struggles. Some even mocked her reluctance to return to the spotlight, but those closest to her knew the truth. Agnetha never craved fame. She craved normalcy, yet when ABBA's songs were revived in the Mamma Mia musical and film adaptations, it was Agnetha's soaring vocals that carried the nostalgia. No matter how much time passed, her sound remained timeless, untouchable, and unforgettable. Still, one question followed her throughout her life. What was her true relationship with Benny Andersson? For years, she stayed silent, letting speculation swirl. Was there a rivalry, a buried affection, or simply a bond forged by music? As Benny, now in his late 70s, finally spoke openly about her, the world realized that their connection ran deeper than anyone had guessed. It wasn't tabloid scandal. It was something much more profound, tied to ABBA's very soul. When people talk about ABBA, they often point to the obvious pairings: Björn with Agnetha, Benny with Frida. On stage, it was neat, symmetrical. Two couples powering one of the most successful bands of all time. But behind the polished image, the truth was more complicated, and nowhere was this more evident than in the quiet, often misunderstood connection between Benny Andersson and Agnetha. Beltskog. From the very beginning, Benny recognized something extraordinary in Agnetha. As the band's chief composer alongside Björn, he needed voices that could bring their intricate pop melodies to life. Agnetha's voice wasn't just another instrument. It was the emotional engine of ABBA. Time and again, Benny crafted songs knowing that only she could deliver the depth they required. When he wrote "The Winner Takes It All" with Björn, many assumed the song was just about Björn and Agnetha's crumbling marriage. But Benny later admitted that what struck him most was Agnetha's ability to transform lyrics into lived experience. She gave the song its truth, he reflected. Without her, it would have been just another ballad. This creative reliance bred an unusual closeness. Though Benny was married to Frida during ABBA's peak years, he often spent long hours in the studio working with Agnetha. Those sessions were not always easy. Agnetha was a perfectionist, known to insist on retakes until her voice captured the precise emotion she envisioned. Benny, equally meticulous, sometimes clashed with her, but beneath the tension was mutual respect. Musicians who witnessed their recording sessions described them as electric. There was no need for words. The music itself seemed to carry an unspoken dialogue between the two. Fans, of course, speculated endlessly. Was there something more? Did Benny harbor feelings for Agnetha that went beyond music? Rumors of hidden romances circulated in the press, fueled by the undeniable chemistry heard in songs like SOS or Knowing Me, Knowing You. Both Agnetha and Benny remained silent for decades, dismissing the gossip as a distraction from the music. Yet their silence only deepened the intrigue. The truth, however, was more nuanced. Benny wasn't Agnetha's lover. He was her interpreter. He understood her fragility, her longing for stability, her discomfort with fame, and he channeled those vulnerabilities into ABBA's music. In doing so, he gave her voice a stage to tell stories that resonated with millions. For Agnetha, Benny was not simply a bandmate or producer. He was someone who saw her in ways that others overlooked. He didn't just hear her voice, he heard the person behind it. But this bond came at a cost. Frida, Benny's wife at the time, often felt overshadowed by the attention he gave to Agnetha's performances. The dynamic created quiet tensions within the group, though the band rarely allowed these personal conflicts to spill into public view. By the late 1970s, as both Björn and Agnetha's marriage dissolved and Benny's own marriage with Frida unraveled, ABBA's personal dramas were inseparable from their music. Every song became a battlefield of unspoken feelings, every lyric an echo of their private struggles. When ABBA finally disbanded in 1982, Benny seemed to move on quickly. He threw himself into new projects, composing musicals like Chess and continuing his long-standing partnership with Björn. Agnetha, on the other hand, withdrew from public life, choosing solitude over stardom. For decades, it seemed as though their paths had permanently diverged. And yet, Benny never stopped talking about her. In interviews across the years, when asked about ABBA's success, he would return again and again to Agnetha's voice. He credited her with making their music timeless, with elevating their songs from pop hits into global anthems. In one rare moment of candor, Benny admitted, "She was the heart of ABBA. Without her, we would have been just another band." At 78, Benny finally addressed the question that had lingered for decades. What was the truth about Agnetha? His answer was not scandalous, nor was it romantic in the way tabloids had long suggested. Instead, it was something deeper, a profound acknowledgement of her artistry, her resilience, and the sacrifices she made for ABBA's success. "She gave more than people know," he said, "more than she ever got back." For fans who had waited years for closure, Benny's words were both illuminating and heartbreaking. The truth about Agnetha wasn't a secret affair or hidden drama. It was the fact that she had carried the emotional weight of ABBA on her shoulders, often at great personal cost. And Benny, more than anyone else, recognized it. For decades, it seemed like ABBA's story had ended in 1982. The band members went their separate ways, each dealing with the aftershocks of divorce, fame, and creative exhaustion. Benny Andersson found a second act in musicals and orchestral projects.